So I would like to welcome Dani Ticktin Koplik. She is one of our Brown Alumni Executive Career Coaches. She's also the founder of dtkResources and a certified executive and organizational coach. We have invited her here today to give us some pointers and to ask our questions about building your professional presence and quickly establishing value in the new economy. Since a lot of the statistics show that Generation Y has been faced with more unemployment and underemployment over the past few years, we have asked Dani, who has developed many Generation Y specific programs, to focus mainly on this population. However, tips for succeeding in your career apply to everyone. Dani, welcome today.
Thanks, Heather. It's wonderful to be here. I'm obviously very passionate about working with this generation and working in this capacity. I'm very excited to talk with everyone and share some of these tips that I hope will give you not only a leg up on the competition, but also the architecture for a successful career going forward. And I do look forward to your questions too, because the truth is that I could talk forever on most of these topics, and I really want to get to what everybody has on their mind.
Okay, great. Well, we are excited to get started, and we're hoping today that you can talk to us about what effect this economy has had on building a career.
Sure. Before I answer that, I'd just like to say that I think that these changes are actually very good because we do live in a very complex global marketplace, and these changes are pretty much overdue. So it's not these tips are not just for now; they are for the new normal going forward, and this is the new reality. So the new reality is that we actually may be technically out of the recession, but economic indicators change by the minute. I mean, you just have to read the paper and see that one column will say one thing and the other will say another. So what that really means is that there is uncertainty and unpredictability all the time, and we have to just assume that those are the givens. This may be difficult to tolerate, but it also just depends on your mindset and how you choose to see it. So in terms of the current world of work, to help make sense of all this, I break it down into two simple lessons. The first that I've mentioned already is that the only thing that is certain is uncertainty. And the other, which is sort of practical, I mean, that's just sort of to orient you, but what's very practical and what's very helpful is to understand that we have to distinguish between what we can control and what we can't control. This is helpful in life as well. It cuts down on a lot of anxiety. So what we cannot control, we'll go to what we cannot control first. Obvious things. We can't control the economy. We can't control the weather as much as we may try. We can't control downsizing. We can't control what's going on in Greece. We can't control airport delays. These are just things that it's just not worth getting steamed up over. So I would really recommend that you save your energy for what you can control. And what we can control simply is ourselves. Very, very simple. We can't control other people. We can't control other circumstances, but we can control ourselves, and that will be the key to moving forward to a successful career. So, as I said, in the end, we can only control ourselves. There are plenty of forces acting on us daily, but every day actually presents us with choices, and it's up to us to make the ones that maximize our opportunities for success.
So can you talk a little bit about what it is we control and what are our choices and how we can improve our chances for getting off to a great start?
Sure. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the only thing we can control is ourselves. And so most people actually choose to show up, do the work, make friends, go home, and do it all over again. And then they'll wonder why their performance review is mediocre, or worse, they're passed over for promotion. The truth is that while the economy was going through its changes, so were the shape and requirements of the American workplace. We all know that there are many fewer jobs available, and so competition gets that much stiffer. So these days, working hard is just not enough. The 21st century requires a whole other take on what work and ultimately success are all about. So again, doing the job is not enough.
So from your experience, what are some tips that will help the newly employed or the temporarily employed in positions to position themselves for success today?
Great. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are just not enough, but beyond that, we can say that the things that are not enough are for other people. What we're dealing with is you. And when we talk about career success, we talk about the following 5 points. This is not everything, but this is just to give you some sort of anchor as you start to develop yourself and a successful career. So we have to be able to communicate really well. We have to be able to connect. We have to perform. Seems like a no-brainer, but not so much. It really is something that a lot of people don't take seriously. We also have to develop what we call a personal brand, and you're at a great point to start doing that because you're at the beginning of your career. And the other is, in the end, after all is said and done, we also have to learn to self-advocate. There are fewer people in the workforce, fewer managers. We have to take that on ourselves. It's the same as the analogy is, you go into a job interview and you don't tell people that you actually want the job. You have to be clear that you are interested in succeeding. So those are the 5 points. And okay. Go ahead.
So those are great points, and I'm sitting here wondering from our audience, which of these 5, first they're feeling like, hey, these are my strengths, I'm already there, and then maybe which of these they think, oh, these are the ones I really need to work on. These are the ones I need to improve. And I was wondering if people in the audience, if you'd be willing to send us the ones that you really want to work the most on so we can be sure that we can focus on those today. So that would be really helpful, I think, because these are a lot of great points and a lot of information. As Dani said, she could give us talk all day long, and we'd like to be able to focus in on what's going to be the most important. I have things coming in about a couple of different things, personal brand, performance, making connections. This is also a great time for me to encourage, if you have some specific questions, to please send those in. We did receive some through the registration. Thank you. But if we have time today to cover more, we'd certainly like to do that. So submit your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Okay, so a couple more: self-advocating, perception. A lot of great input here. What I'm seeing, Dani, is that people would like us to at least touch on all of them, but I'll keep calculating. I'm wondering if at this point you can give us a little bit more information. Maybe we could start by discussing professional communication and what makes it different from how we communicate every day.
Absolutely. Yes, I consider communications, the reason it's number 1, is what I call a tentpole skill. Almost everything else you do is going to rely on being an effective communicator. More important than ever, we live in a global community that requires a lot of specificity and sensitivity, and there's a lot of nuance. So we really have to be very mindful. And that's globally, but even domestically, at home, our workplace is much more diverse and is getting increasingly diverse every day. So, if you layer onto that the fact that there are more means of communication than ever, and I'm going to just say, computers, smartphones, iPads, internet, social media, texting, tweeting, blogs, e-zines, and that's just, that's not even the stuff that we do every day. So what happens is particularly when this generation speaks and communicates every day, it's through a lot of these other means. But in the business area, we have to really clean up our language. We can't use all of that, I call AOL speak. We can't use the LOLs. We can't use the be right backs. We have to really say things in words. And it's very important because, let me just say also that another function of this marketplace, this workforce, is that it's multi-generational. So the way you guys speak to each other will not necessarily resonate to the other generations that are in the workforce. So you really have to try to speak regular English with grammar, with punctuation, with capitalization, and be very, very specific in what you're talking about. So again, there are more means of communication than ever, and the good news about that is that there are also more opportunities to be heard, and that's great. But more opportunities also to be misunderstood. So that's another reason why we have to make sure that your language is clear, specific, on point. People don't have a lot of time these days, and so we really have to make sure that when we communicate, whether it's by email or whether it's live, in person, face-to-face, we have to make sure that we stay on point and that we're very specific.
So do you have some key skills that you could give us about that?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you that what I think is the number one most important skill is to be an active listener. Really, really important. It sounds like it's a no-brainer also, but you'd be surprised. I mean, most people, when they go into a meeting or they go into an interview, are so busy thinking about what they want to say that they're not really listening to what's being said. Now, the virtue of being an active listener is that frequently things will be clarified for you. You don't run the risk of redundancy, and worse, you don't run the risk of omission. So it's very important to listen. When you listen, you will gather probably the information that you need, and that is always good to be able to leverage going forward. You can't move forward until you know where you are today, which speaks then to also knowing your audience. You must know to whom you're speaking, and you have to speak so that they understand. Your communication must be succinct, specific, clear, and on point. And those skills will help you in terms of feedback. Feedback is something that your generation is known to crave. They want feedback, but the truth is you can't just want positive feedback. You can't just want positive feedback. You have to be genuine in your request for feedback. And feedback is just a course correction, and it's a very important thing to be good at receiving as well as giving. So the more you listen and the more you genuinely listen, the more you'll be able to take that feedback to heart and hear it rather than shut down and think of it as criticism. And then, there's also something called reading the culture, and that's also part of knowing your audience. When you go into a company, they have their own folkways, as if you're going into a college campus that has its own rhythms and its own language and everything else. When you go into a company, every company has its own personality, and I think maybe that's the best way to describe culture. So before you start speaking, before you start blogging and emailing and everything else, make sure you know what the standard operating procedure is in the company, and that's part of reading the culture. Understand how people communicate, understand how meetings are conducted, and you will be much better off and a much better communicator if you stop, listen, and the other part of reading the culture is observing what other people are doing, and that will put you ahead of the pack.
So as you were talking, some great communication questions came in. One was about handling social media and its relationship to your job. And I know there's been a lot in the news lately about that. Do you have any points you'd like to make?
Sure. Social media is not the be-all and the end-all. It is not. It exists as a tool, all right? It's not an end in itself. It is a tool. And you must be extremely, extremely careful using social media in the workplace. That stuff, as I'm sure you've been told going through the interview process, but it's even more important to say it once you're working. That stuff out there lives forever. It lives forever, and don't post anything you wouldn't want in Times Square. It's really, really critical to understand this, and you have to make sure that your Facebook page is sanitized. You have to be just very mindful of where this goes, of what you're saying. Be careful in employee chat rooms. They're great for certain things, but you really don't want to be seen as critical. So just be very mindful. Understand that everything you say is going to be out there forever for everybody to see.
Another great question that came in was, for those who've been out there 2 or 3 years and they've had a little experience in the culture and they've gained a little bit of experience, do you have any good tips for them, ways that they can now start stepping up with their communication and interacting and using some of those tips and feedback?
Sure. Well, all of these things are habits. They're nothing more than learning new habits. And the best way to learn new habits is to keep practicing. Until, in the beginning, when there's a new habit, it may feel a little bit strange. And that's because it's just existing in your short-term memory, and you have to be very mindful. But with practice, it'll become second nature. So it's you start with an awareness. You have to be aware before you can make changes. Once you're aware, then you have to say, all right, how much do I really want to make this change? And when then you make the change, you have to practice it. You have to practice it. You have to hold yourself accountable. So the only way is really to do it and then sit back and understand how it's been received. The best way to do all of these things is to start in a non-threatening environment. So if you want to make a decision, start to practice active listening, let's say, try it with your family or try it with your friends, and then make sure that it's received properly, and then you can try it again in the workplace. But definitely start with listening. That will tell you just so much. But the other thing you really must do is ask questions, ask appropriate questions, because if you don't get clarification on things, you're apt to go in the wrong direction. So make sure you have real clarity on what's being asked of you. And beyond that, we communicate every day, but just be very mindful of getting to the point. The old saying that I like to use with a lot of my clients is, if someone asks you what time it is, don't tell them how to make a watch. You got to get to the point. You got to think in bullet points. When you communicate in email, really think in bullet points. Make it easy on the other person to understand. It's like marketing. You have to make it easy for the other person, and that's going to be your gift, and that's going to be a huge advantage.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of the communication is also making connections, and I know that was one of your 5 areas. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm sure everybody has heard the old saw about it's not what you know, it's who you know. That really applies now more than ever. And the reason for that is that anything that's informational, we're not in the information age anymore. We are in the conceptual age. And in order to make use of conceptual thinking, we have to be able to connect. And work is done more relationally than ever. The way companies are structured now is much flatter. And for those of you who don't know what that means, in the old system we had what they called command and control. It was hierarchical. Now, and you were given orders, and you accomplished, you fulfilled what was expected of you in your little area, and then it went up and up and up the food chain to where decisions are made. Now decisions are made on a more horizontal basis. There are fewer people in the workplace, and you get to interact with more and more people because things are collaborative and they're team-based. So you need to be able to not only communicate with people, but connect with people, because the truth is that people hire, people promote, and people do business with the people whom they trust and with whom they feel comfortable. So connecting is about finding some way to reach another person and to do it generously. Connecting is less about what someone is going to be able to give you and more about what you can do for somebody else. So it's really important to start doing this. Connecting also, there's a lot of talk about networking. Everyone says, okay, networking. Networking is very important, but networking can't just be about the numbers. Networking has to be about making connections. And those are the people that you're going to carry with you through your career. And when you network and when you make connections, you make them at your own level, but don't hesitate to make them lower down the food chain in your company, of course with your peers and your colleagues, and then up the food chain as well. It's very, very important to develop these connections, because the truth is here that if all you do is work, the only thing you're going to get is more work. The only way to build a career is to form genuine connections with people on your way up. And you do that internally and externally. We just discussed internal, but externally, become active in professional organizations. And, here's a plug, become active in your Brown Club locally. You really, it is about who you know, and the reason it's not about what you know is because what you know is just the price of admission. You don't get credit for that. That's expected. And then as you build your network, it gets richer, it gets deeper, you get more professional, and then you start to develop what we call a sphere of influence, which will be just critical as you build your career. The currency of business is not necessarily information, but it's influence. It's what impact are you going to have on decisions. And you will get that as you build your network. More and more people become familiar with who you are, and they trust you, and then will take what you say extremely seriously.
So as as you were talking, a question came in, and we also had this earlier about for those who in this economy have found themselves maybe taking a temporary position or a even postgraduate internship, or maybe, taking a job that is not exactly where they want to be. How do they really build that as a networking experience?
Well, the first thing is to understand that these kinds of positions, temporary and also internships, can almost be thought of as an extended job interview if you're lucky. I mean, more so with internships than necessarily temporary jobs. But the great news about temporary work is that it increases your touch points with more and more people. So again, you want to try to connect with people even in a temporary position, and get to know them and let them know who you are, and really, go beyond what's expected and make an impression. Be a team player in these situations. These references, these connections will be great as you go forward. And again, as I said before, it's really important to try to help other people, connect them. You may find another temp in the organization that you're working for who is looking for a position not like you're looking for, but that maybe a friend of yours is involved in another company. They're looking for someone. Great to try to connect those people. Those become lasting connections, and, to be somewhat mercenary about it, it builds obligation too, so that when you've done something good for other people, they feel a little obligated to do that for you as well. So I think that it's great to be able to do temporary work. Certainly it brings in some income while you're looking for your final position, but temp work may in fact become a full-time offer. So you have to treat that, and you have to treat an internship as though they are job interviews, extended job interviews.
So at the beginning of when we were talking, Dani, you touched on that there's an increased performance expectation for employees. What are some of the ways that we can meet these expectations?
Great question, Heather. You teed it up for me. These days, meeting expectations, just not enough. It's got to be all about exceeding expectations. So it's really, really important when you perform to take ownership of this yourself. You have to self-manage. As I said before, there are fewer layers of management, which means you're going to have more individual responsibility for making sure you get the job done. But it's not just about doing the job. It's about looking for more. It's about taking the information that you get, the assignments you get, all the listening that you've done, and trying to figure out, where do you see gaps in the organization? What can you do to start filling those gaps? How can you improve efficiency? How can you improve a process? So all of this then comes down to, how are you delivering value? There is a very short learning curve these days in the workplace, and yeah, you may get some training or orientation when you get there, but the people who succeed are the ones who are going to be able to hit the ground running, and it's incumbent on you to sort of educate yourself, and that's where reading the culture comes in, that's where exquisite communications come in, that's where being able to connect comes in. So this is just a really important part of performing. And part of what we need to show in the workplace today is that we're critical thinkers. Again, it's not enough to just have the information or know the answer. It's much more important to know how to make sense of that, how to leverage it, how to deploy it, and find other kinds of answers. Very, very important to be able to contextualize what you're doing. As I say, it's not about what chapters are on the test. It's about the implications of those chapters for the rest of the book. And then what does that book mean for the sequel? You always have to be thinking about what something implies, what can you infer from it. And in addition, it's not enough to know your job. It's not even enough to just sort of know what's going on with other people's jobs. You must be lifelong learners. And whether that means additional training, whether it means adult education, whether it means taking advantage of all the professional development courses at your disposal when you go to a company, you must be a lifelong learner. The world changes so fast that unless you are current you'll never be able to see what's coming. And so lifelong learning is really, really important. And you don't want to stop, because once you're static, the world is going to change around you. So you just must be constantly retooling, re-engineering, rethinking, and that's what will help make you become indispensable and a really desirable candidate and employee and prospect, a high potential for moving forward. And also, I just want to say that, when I talk about, when people talk about meeting expectations, they think that that's what's necessary for performance review. But these days, meeting expectations amounts to the grade of C on a performance review. Everyone shows up. Everyone has to do their work. That's expected. Now, what more are you going to do? What other value can you deliver? Very, very important. This has to be routine.
What I'm hearing from you, and I'm on campus, so I've got Brown in my head often, and people talk a lot about the Brown curriculum as emphasizing some of the things you've said, as in, critical thinking and being innovative. And so hopefully people who've been out there a little while have conquered some of those skills. And I'm noticing that I had several questions come in on personal branding, and I think part of that is how to get the message across. Can you talk a little bit about that for our audience?
Yeah, of course. Personal branding is one of those buzz phrases that's out there now, sort of like networking. Personal branding, everyone and their brother has a different take on personal branding. The most important thing about personal branding is to know that it's in your control, and you're at the beginning of your careers. Most of you are at the beginning of your careers. This is the exact perfect time to start doing this, and start doing it with intention and purpose. You want to develop a professional presence. You're going to get professional training to do your job, but that's not all it is. Professional presence is a whole other thing. That's what's going to get you recognized, and there are a lot of factors that go into that, but you want to start, if you think about a personal brand as developing a reputation, you can start doing that now, and the way you start doing that now is you become known for certain things. Branding comes right out of consumer packaged goods, which comes right out of branding of cattle. You have some symbol or idea or name that stands for a whole host of other qualities. So it's the same with a personal brand. If someone says Dani Ticktin Koplik, they don't have to go through a whole resume. They know that Dani shows up, Dani delivers, Dani has a forward take on things, Dani is an out-of-the-box thinker, she pushes the envelope, she's reliable, she's dependable, she has integrity. That all has to sum up when you say somebody's name. So the way you do that is by actually doing everything, following through, being dependable, having integrity, being a truth teller. And part of being a truth teller is that when someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, do not BS it. Say you don't know, but you'll get back to them. You want to display integrity all the time. Once you develop a personal brand, no one can take it away from you, and that's what you become known as. So you use all of the skills that you've used at Brown. Most important, I believe, is being able to think critically, being able to think outside the box, and using your intelligence to come up with new and innovative solutions. That's what it's all about. So if you become known as that, you will have developed an extremely strong personal brand, and that is just essential to moving forward in your chosen career. You really want to be all about not drama, not details, but finding solutions and finding solutions through innovation. And I think that dovetails really nicely with the whole mission of a Brown curriculum.
That's great comments that you made, too, because a couple of people said, the tough thing about personal branding is not sounding arrogant. And I think when people hear personal brand, they think, oh, I got to be a salesperson about myself. And, it's the integrity and the dependability that is what comes across, and that's all genuine. And that's not arrogance. Yeah.
It's not, a personal brand is not about selling yourself. A personal brand is about walking the talk, about doing what you say you're going to do, living how you want to be seen, having integrity. It's not about selling yourself, at all. You just must live it, and you must walk the talk. And the key to a personal brand is it has to be consistent. If you think about Starbucks, and it's arguable whether it's good coffee or not, but the point is that it's the same in every single Starbucks. Starbucks is a brand, you say the word, and a whole host of qualities come to your mind. You know, grande, venti, tall, you know all of those. You know it when you hear the word Starbucks. Same way as when you hear Heather Wilkerson, a whole host of qualities are going to come to mind. That's what a personal brand is. It is not at all about selling yourself. It's about understanding the consumer and developing yourself in a way that performs and delivers value and satisfies needs. That's what having a personal brand is about.
So can you give an example of maybe how one of your clients had to, work on, getting their message across, maybe showcasing their skills at work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite clients is a woman who came to me who was working in a large not-for-profit, and she was working in sort of a data area, and very smart, PhD in biology, gave incredible value to the company. But she felt that just by working hard, she was going to get recognized and be promoted. And so we talked about that a lot, and we decided we were going to embark on a campaign, and her name happened to be Joanne, so we called it Brand Joanne. And in her discovery process, she realized, I asked her one time, do you think your boss knows you're ambitious? And she was silent for about 3 minutes, said, oh, my God, I don't think that he knows this. So it comes down to letting people know what you're all about. And so we did this branding thing, and part of the branding was having her take up a little bit more space, letting her start to take credit for what she was doing. It's great to be all for the company, but you also have to be able to feature yourself a little bit. So she started letting people know and getting out there and making her positions known, circulating things that she had written. She was in the great position of being able to write papers and stuff. So instead of just having them go out to the ether, she started distributing them internally. She started speaking up about more things. She started networking within the company, making appointments to see the boss's boss. You have to, of course, read the culture and know if that's appropriate. But in this case, that it was. And she started delivering a different kind of value. She started weighing in and starting to be strategic. If all you do is work, then again, that's all you're going to get. But you must be strategic in the way you think and how you can add value, and then you have to let it be known. And you don't do it in a bragging way, but you do it in a self-respecting way, and you think that, all right, what I'm delivering brings value to this company. They need to know that I'm capable of this and that I can give them so much more. So she was able to start doing that, and before long she had actually gotten her firm and another firm in a bidding war for her. She'd been there for 12 years, was afraid to leave, but as she built this personal brand, she became more and more convinced of her own value, which was tremendous, and then was able to have a successful outcome. So that was just very exciting, and it just shows you that you've got to be consistent in what you do, and you also have to make sure that other people know it.
So what I'm hearing is that it sounds like this client was really advocating for herself, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. But I did get another good question from someone saying, you're building awareness of your brand. How, when you're talking about getting that across, do you have any other ideas about getting it across to the right people? How to ensure that your qualities are visible?
Yes, absolutely. Start volunteering to do other projects. Volunteer. Find out what's going on in other departments. Ask if you can sit in on a meeting. People like go-getters, and in this environment, you don't get anything by sitting back. And I'm not saying to be obnoxious or be piggy or gratty or anything like that. But you have to know that if you've got the goods, maybe there are other places where you can deploy it. So get involved in internal affinity groups, organizations. Get involved with their community service. The more ways that you can be in touch with more people, the better your personal brand, the more it'll develop, and the more you'll be advocating for yourself without being braggy, without boasting, without calling attention to yourself. If you get into, the good news about connecting with people is you can get into sort of informal relationships as well. And the more you can keep this stuff conversational rather than putting your name up on a marquee and saying, everybody look at me, the better off you'll be. So you want to be conversational about it, and you want to do the work, and you want to volunteer for things that may be a little outside your comfort zone. Learn something new, add value where you can. Those are the ways to start doing it. You know, you really try to think outside your own cubicle and think about where else you can add value, how else you can get involved, how you can be part of the company's mission and vision, and those are the things that will help you advance your personal brand.
And those are some of your self-advocating things that you've been talking about too.
Absolutely, absolutely. You want to make sure that you're established in your industry, join these professional organizations, get on committees. I mean, all of this is great because the world does turn on the networks that you have, the powerful networks that you have, and being known not just for, you know, going in and doing stuff like adding extracurriculars to your college application, but you've got to be authentic in the way you do all of these things. And keep track of your accomplishments too, because when performance review time comes around and your boss is conveniently forgetful, you will have a file of positive emails that people sent you or documentation about a project that you did. All of that is important, very, very important. And, you know, check in with your boss from time to time and let them know what you're up to and where you've taken initiative and where you've affected change. Those are the important things to do when you advocate for yourself.
Dani, you've really given us a wealth of information. I'm laughing because I found that I had myself on mute. We have a lot of information. You've given us these 5 great key areas. What I was thinking is that I might just bring these back up here where we can sort of think about, you know, what you've told us about building our presence and gaining value within the organization and go over a couple more questions that have come in. We have a few more minutes. It's about 12:40. And there's a lot of questions on a couple of different areas that I thought we might be able to go back and visit. And just to say that we do have time if there's any other questions people are thinking about submitting, that hopefully we can get to them. One of the things is when you were discussing communication skills, and this came in a couple of different ways. People talking about, you know, when is it okay to be proactive, when is it not, and all of that seems to talk to me about culture, understanding the culture, being proactive, listening, how that all sort of melds together. So when do you sit back and listen, and when, you know, as you talked about in communication, and then when are you more proactive, like you talked about, in performing, and how do you sort of meld these two? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, fine. They're not mutually exclusive. I don't want anybody to think that listening is a passive sport. It's not. We call it active listening. So you're listening not only for information, but you're listening for meaning. And meaning will give you clues as to how you can be proactive. So, you know, when you're starting out in a career, you're not going right to the corner office, right? You're serving someone who probably serves someone who's in the corner office. So your job is not only to do your job, but your job is also to make your boss look good. And in that way, you can gauge how much your boss is open to your being proactive. And the deal is you want to take as much weight off your boss's shoulders as possible. And so I'm not saying, you know, be proactive. Oh, I've got the next new market that this bank needs to open up. I mean, you know, maybe there'll be a time for that. But for the moment, it's about, you know, building credibility, building rapport, and those two things go toward building trust. And if your boss is trusting you, your boss hopefully will then entrust you with more things to do. But always keep your eyes open. You know, that's the listening. It's the listening and observing will give you the power and the foundation to start being more proactive, to think about where there's an efficiency you can accomplish, where there's a way that you can better support your boss or take something off your boss's plate, where you can close a gap or where you can identify an opportunity. And then, of course, you have to be very tactful in how you come back to your boss or to whomever you're serving and introduce that, because you don't want to usurp someone else's territory. You don't want to step on toes. So you have to be very savvy at the same time. But being proactive when you're at the beginning of a career is a great mindset to have, because you make yourself that much more invaluable. And so I think listening and being proactive go hand in hand, and they reinforce each other. And the other thing I want to say is when you're being proactive, you have to make sure that you're not so in love with your own idea that you're not being in tune to how it's going to be received or whether it really has value. You know, we all have ideas a mile a minute. We're stimulated by so many things every day, but most people, advertisers, big companies as well, tend to fall in love with their own ideas and forget what is the real utility of this. So you really want to make sure that you're not just making noise, that you are providing value.
So one of the things that came up when it was, you know, how do you know when it's okay in the environment to sort of put in your own opinion or to, you know, question the why. And I think that really goes to what is, if a person is a good fit for the organization or not. And fit can have a lot of meanings. Can you clarify what that means and the
Sure.
different sort of possibilities?
Yeah, I'm going to go back a little bit too, though, to discuss when is it appropriate to start doing that. You have to be very careful not to be presumptuous. I mean, here's the deal about Gen Y. Gen Y, to your credit, are very, very perceptive, are very sophisticated in many ways because you've always been part of the conversation. First of all, you've got all these means of communication, you have access to the internet and limitless information. But in terms of my generation of parents, we have always included you in the conversation. You know, every generation is a reaction to the one that came before. And so we were of the generation of, you know, children should be seen and not heard. Well, now this generation is very accustomed to weighing in on things. In the workplace, you have to be a little sensitive to that. You have to know when it's appropriate, and it's also how you phrase it. So the best device, the best tool to use in any situation where there's a question, whether it's giving feedback to a friend or a colleague or a subordinate, or whether it's volunteering your opinion, is to ask permission. It's a very powerful tool. So you go to your boss, you know, excuse me, sir, would it be okay if I have some thoughts, would it be okay if I volunteered those? So you're still being proactive, but you're making sure you get that permission first. And then as you develop credibility and your personal brand and get known for the quality of the work you do, you won't have to ask permission so much. So that's the first part. Now to fit. Fit is another one, like personal branding, like networking. It's a buzzword now. And the truth is that there's so much available talent in the workforce right now that employers can be exquisitely selective. And so assuming that there are resumes from people who all can do the work, again, remember, baseline, price of admission, they're then looking for people who are going to fit into the culture of the organization. And that's something, you know, to draw it in the broadest possible way. If you are accustomed to going to an interview in a suit and tie and polished shoes and cropped hair, cleanly shaven and everything else, and you go up to Google, they may not think that you're the best fit for their organization. Conversely, if you go up to Morgan Stanley and you are in a band T-shirt with a 3-day growth and flip-flops and jeans, not so much. You're okay for Google, but you're not okay for Morgan Stanley. So that's, I mean, in the most exaggerated terms, that's sort of an idea of fit. Beyond that, it's, you know, are you, if it's a company that's very, if it's international, let's say, you may have to have a different kind of presence. You may have to be able to tailor your responses to the way that a company interacts with its customers, or if you're owned by if you're a subsidiary of an international company, you have to have a different mindset. So fit is being able to understand that culture and be part of it. The other piece is that when you're interviewing and in the beginning of a career, fit goes in the other direction too. Does this company, if you are very bent on social responsibility or a green company, you've got to vet that stuff for yourself first, and you find that that's finding a company that fits with your personal agenda. So fit goes in two ways. It's the company looking for fit, and it's you're looking for fit in a company. I hope that explains it. Was that clear enough?
That was really clear, Dani. And it is. There's a couple of questions coming in about, and I'm gonna paraphrase really about, you know, what if management, supervisors aren't really that happy about your feedback. They'd more appreciate you just doing your work and not really giving your opinion. And that, to me, sort of goes into that idea of fit. You might be in a place that's not that great of a fit. What do you do now? How do you handle that?
Well, if it's not a great fit, you have a couple of choices. I mean, you can always leave, right, if it's not a fit. Or you can decide that maybe it's not a fit now, or that you see potential there, and so you want to just grit your teeth and bear it for a while. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, because here's what's valued in today's workplace. I mean, along with the critical thinking and being collaborative and being innovative, we ask people to do two things at the same time, which is what makes two opposite things at the same time, which is what makes this environment a little confusing. But for the people like Brown students who can hold more than one thought in their head at a time, it's an opportunity. And here's the deal. We expect people to have very, very specific knowledge of situations of their area of expertise. We expect a lot of specificity there. On the flip side, we also expect people to be incredibly flexible and adaptable. So we're asking you to be really specific, but we're also asking you to be flexible and adaptable. And there's no bigger time when you have to be flexible and adaptable than at the beginning of a career. So there may be companies that still have a little of a hierarchy there, in which case you may have to just simply pay your dues. And that means being quiet until the right opportunity comes. And you do have to pay dues. As I said, another way of saying it was you have to earn trust. You have to learn. You have to become credible. So if a company isn't so receptive right away, what's your tolerance for that? Can you tolerate that in view of the bigger picture, where there's maybe a bigger payoff at the end, or you have a long trajectory in terms of a career? So that's a very personal decision. What is your tolerance for it? How much can you tolerate now? Is it a function just of paying dues, or is it just a very top-down organization that isn't interested in anything anybody else has to say? My feeling is that other than the government and the military, most companies are going to be a little bit more receptive to input these days, because everyone is looking for better ways to do things, more efficient ways of doing things, deploying their personal and material capital better. So, I'm thinking that it's going to be there. It may just require a little bit of patience and, not being the upstart on the block, the young whippersnapper who's coming in and knows it better. You got to be a little humble when you offer this stuff as well.
This sounds a little bit like you're reading the culture and adjusting. Is that what you meant when you were talking about that?
Exactly. Yes. I mean, that's a personal decision. You don't have to adjust. If it's not a culture that fits for you, then you have to find something else. But if you decide to stay, then you must adjust and adapt to the culture, because it's not in your best interest not to.
So as you were talking about that, having to keep a couple of things in your head, research is showing that companies are expecting, they're trying to get employees to do 2 or 3 jobs at once and not backfill. And what's happening is that it can cause quite a bit of burnout. Do you have any recommendations about how to avoid that?
Yeah, I would say that you have to first gird yourself for a fair amount of that in the beginning of a career. As you move forward and you have people, let's say, reporting to you, you have to become really, really expert at the fine art of delegating. Micromanaging is probably the worst culprit in burnout. So, in the beginning, when you don't have anyone reporting to you and it's all on you, you just have to make sure that your self-care is such that you can sustain this level of pressure or volume of work. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. So you have to make sure you take care of yourself. You have to eat well. You have to sleep. And I know it's hard. Your rhythms are off. Circadian rhythms are off with the rest of the workplace. You want to sleep till 10, but you've got to sort of get in sync with that. You've got to take care of yourself. You've got to eat right. You've got to sleep. You've got to have some physical exercise where you can blow off some steam. You have to try not to go out during the week and drink. I mean, you really need your stamina. And then as you go forward, I think that you have to become better at delegating, because the tendency is for people to try to keep everything under their control, and that is a surefire recipe for burnout. Part and parcel of that, as you get more advanced as well, is learning how to set some boundaries. I mean, obviously, if your boss is asking you to pick up their laundry or doing inappropriate things. You have to set a boundary there. But boundaries really, as you progress through the organization, become important in knowing what you can handle and what you can't. But for the moment, the truth is that you've got to just accept some of it and take care of yourself as well as you can.
So, Dani, we have a few more minutes. There's a couple more questions that came in that I wanted to share with you. One was talking about, given that there are a lot of job changes now, either voluntary or involuntary, do you have any advice to help ensure that people have positive mobility when they're crossing maybe different companies or organizations or work areas?
Changing positions within a company, positive mobility, meaning that they themselves on a career track? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think if they're, maybe they've been laid off, or they, it really was a bad fit and they're trying to move, how to sell themselves forward so they're not just moving out but moving up. What's the best way to do that? I think that's, back to maybe personal brand and self-advocating.
Yeah, well, so, what I'm understanding is, I guess there are two different versions of this. One is if you've left an organization or you're trying to get placed, how do you keep yourself in a positive forward momentum? Well, that's what I'm hearing is part of it. And the other is if you're changing within an organization, how do you reestablish yourself? I don't mean to be obtuse, but I want to make sure I answer it right.
The question came in both ways. So maybe take it let's start with the first part.
Okay, so what the best thing to do when you're feeling sort of a little vulnerable because you've either left or someone's not made it easier for you to leave, the first thing you have to do is make sure you establish a routine, that you keep that self-care going, and that you get up every day, you stay in a rhythm, you stay in a routine, and stay positive, and do things that make you feel good. Make sure that you are not grinding absolutely every minute of every day looking for a job. You have to give yourself some breathing space, some self-care, and just make it a job. Get up every day. Get into getting up at the regular work. And I think that goes a long way. And then just keep working, keep doing that lifelong learning thing. Get yourself trained in something else. Make yourself more valuable in other ways, and keep that networking going, not asking for a job, but informational interviews, learning more about the industry that you want to target, and just really trying to do things to help yourself stay positive. I'm a big believer in exercise, and I think that's a great way to keep your endorphins up so that you don't move backward. If you're moving within an organization, that's great. If someone wants you in another position, that's wonderful, and you just do the same things that you've been doing all along, which is make sure that your personal brand is solid, that you become known for your follow-through and your dependability and your initiative, and just keep going in that direction. I mean, I'd love it if someone would refine the question a little bit more for me if I'm not hitting it for them. But moving within an organization is no different than staying where you are. In fact, it's great because there are more touch points, you meet more people, just keep doing all those things that we talked about, networking, communicating, connecting, defining your personal brand, and making sure that people know it's you who did something.
Yes, Dani, he did clarify it a little bit. I was trying to send it to you. Okay. And thanks, Alex. Is your brand is strongest within your work area or your company organization? You can't always, which cannot be assumed when moving elsewhere. So it's, your brand is strong where you are, but you're trying to move to a different organization or a different, industry. Maybe it's really, crossing that brand into a different.
All right. Well, you know who has to deal with this really in a very poignant way right now are returning veterans who are coming out of the military with job descriptions and functions that don't line up exactly with the civilian workplace. So they have to figure out what they can extract from that in terms of capability and competency that then can be applied. So I would say the same kind of thing, that you may not have a one-for-one correspondence of what tasks you've done that are applicable. Your brand is your brand. I mean, if you are known for integrity, that doesn't change wherever you go. Your brand you take with you. But if you're trying to establish yourself or get another position within the company that maybe has different requirements, it's up to you to figure out what those requirements are and finesse it so that you can say, well, I did this, which, that job function may not be exactly what you're looking for here, but the competency that I got from that, it's the same competencies. I mean, so if it's like you're looking for another position and you're worried that your particular experience isn't necessarily applicable, then you've got to go the real personal route and try to connect with people in your targeted area and find out what exactly is required. Start discussing it. Try to start figuring out how to translate what you do into what it is they need. And again, these things are really not that complicated, aside from, maybe trying to make the change from being I'm going to make this up for just the exaggeration, from being a hairdresser to being a nuclear physicist. I mean, the skills are completely transferable when you think of them in terms of 21st century skills.
That's a great way of answering that question, and I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. I'm noticing the time. We only have a few more minutes. I feel like we've gotten to a lot of the questions. There are a few more, and if you want to contact Dani personally, you can certainly do that. If you want to contact our office, you can certainly do that. A couple of people are asking if, Dani, you have any recommendations for resources. I did want to let everyone know that Dani has graciously given us 2 free resources. Don't click on your screen because the buttons don't work. But one will be a skill list of 21st century skills to help you sort of go through and evaluate where you are with the things she's talked about today. And the second one is your personal brand worksheet, so to help you sort of work on that personal brand. We have uploaded those to our Facebook page, and you can also email Dani to get those personally or to request any other resources that she might have or any other tools that she might recommend. I did want to say that Dani has given us a lot of information. We only had an hour. She is offering a intensive program for new grads, people who've been out a year, 2 years, in January. I think you said it was January 19th.
Yes, correct.
It is limited. She's doing it as a small group, so you can email her if you are interested in this. I think it's 5 hours, an intensive program on really focusing on all these issues. And where is that, Dani? That's in New York, right?
It's going to be in New York, yes. And
okay.
If people, it's by application, but I will say that Brown alums will have priority. And again, it's like only 20 to 30 people, so it should be a great opportunity to get your questions answered, directly, and also do a deeper dive on the things that we just were able to glance over today.
Great, thank you. If you have other career questions that have come up and you would like a few tools, just want to let you know that through our website we offer several online tools. We have a basic assessment tool called Focus. We do have contacts for all the coaches if you really want to get involved, including Dani. So there's a web page with several coaches and information about them, and they're all Brown alumni, and they all give discounts for those who really want to do some executive coaching or career development work. They also, on that page, is a list of all of the webinars we did last year. They're there recorded for you to watch at your convenience. If you're feeling like you need to do research on careers or actual companies or areas of the country, we have a research tool for that called Career Search. If you are in an active job search, or you just always like to keep that door open in case you're in a job but maybe it's not the best fit, we have a very active job board. From inception, we've had over 300 jobs, active jobs at all times, and most of them are posted by alums or companies that are very interested in hiring Brown alums. We have some great networking tools. We have BrewNet, which is a personal Brown tool by Brown alums who volunteered and said, yes, I am a resource. Plus, we have some very active LinkedIn groups with over 10,000 alums participating in those. So a few things that we have to offer for you. If you'd like more information, please check out our services. If you would like to talk to Dani, here's her contact information. Also like to let you know, again, that those resources are on our Facebook page, and there's a connection there. And to let you know that we also have a Twitter feed where we post jobs and links and all kinds of things like that. So I'd really like to thank you all for participating with us today. And most of all, I want to thank Dani for this excellent presentation and answering all of our questions. I would like to let you know that we will continue to have more webinars. Next month, Pam Lanahan's going to be joining us to discuss her experience. She's a past director, CEO, and now she is a consultant for many businesses. And then after that, we will have Jose Estebil, who is going to discuss his foray into the technical entrepreneurial world. So Dani, thank you very much for today.
My pleasure. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks for participating. Goodbye.
Bye.